and we will kick things off. So welcome, Simplifying SOC 2 Compliance with AWS, Panther, Latacora, and Vanta. We got a full house. Today's agenda, we're going to run through some quick intros. I'm going to have all of our wonderful panelists introduce themselves. Then we're going to hear from Mike why compliance matters. So why should any of us care about this very important thing? We'll hear from John about the Global Security Compliance Program at AWS. Then we're going to hear from Gavin at Vanta about how Vanta works with Panther to enable continuous compliance. And then LVH from Latacora is going to give us some very in-depth, interesting demos about how you actually do all of this with these tools. And then there'll be some time for Q&A. So if you have questions come up, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A tab, and I'll keep track of those and make sure we get to all of them at the end. Without further ado, I will let everybody introduce themselves.
Yeah, I can jump in. Mike Olson from Panther. I work on our partner team, Director of Partner Solutions Engineering, and I've been in cybersecurity about 25 years, working for companies like FireEye, Symantec, Agari, and now Panther. So yeah, excited to be here and welcome everybody.
Excellent. Hey, everyone. I'm Gavin, Group Product Manager here at Vanta. I've been at Vanta for about 2 years here and lead our automation group focused on integrations, tests, and generating evidence automatically for your audits.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Bruno. I'm from AWS. I've been in the security field for over 25 years now. I've worked with many large companies, insurance companies, financial companies, and HP, and now with AWS for the last 3 years. I focus mostly on the partners that are providing security solutions to our mutual customers. I'm happy to be here.
Hi, I'm LVH. It says Lawrence, nobody calls me that. I am one of the founders of Latacora. We are a consultancy that helps organizations build and scale security and compliance practices. We've done that for a whole bunch of shops, including places like Plaid, Notion, Zapier, Vercel, and yeah, a whole bunch of places. Also been in the industry for 20 odd years. Yeah, really glad to be here with a bunch of partners and all software that we use.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So we're going to kick things off with Mike. So the rest of us are going to hide our faces, and we'll see you later.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. Well, excited to be here today with our valued partners, AWS, Vanta, and Latacora. And we're here today to talk about a fundamental shift that we're seeing in how companies are handling compliance today. So let me start off on why compliance matters, if you want to flip to the next slide. And the reality of compliance today, dealing with compliance today, is that frameworks like SOC 2, ISO 20001 are no longer optional. We kind of view these as table stakes, and companies should as well. And they're really foundational for a company in building their customers' trust and confidence in them as a company. And companies that are not able to demonstrate these basic kind of minimum bar compliance are going to not be able to pass the required audits and scale their business and be able to pass these required audits required by their major clients and customers. But the reality is that traditional methods of undergoing compliance or audits are really broken and often involves constantly chasing manual evidence, performing manual reviews, enduring disruptive audit cycles that often come at inopportune times, end of year, end of quarter, all slowing down teams. And a point that I'll, call out here is this often pulls away valuable security engineering resources or analysts from doing actual investigative and response work that they should be focused on. So for all these reasons, we're seeing a fundamental shift in the market in how teams are handling compliance to a more modern approach, such as offered by Panther and Vanta that we'll talk about today. And on the next slide, I'll talk about how combining Panther's security monitoring with Vanta's automated compliance, we're able to achieve this continuous compliance model. I've got this 3-step flywheel here, and I'll kind of step through this so you can kind of see how this continuous compliance is enabled by Panther and Vanta. So on step 1, detect and monitor controls. Foundation to achieving continuous compliance is gaining full visibility into your environment. And so to kind of start off, Panther is a modern cloud native SIEM built on a modern security data lake. And the design behind the data lake approach and building on the data lake is to allow our customers the ability to ingest all of their log sources. So we need to collect all of their log telemetry so that we can provide this continuous monitoring. And that would be across their full environment, including all of their cloud environments, AWS, GCP, Azure, their SaaS applications, network, identity data, and then bringing all these log sources in to provide for this continuous monitoring. And we're not only looking for breaches in their environment, but we're looking for control failures that we can surface. And these control failures may surface as misconfigurations, IAM changes, policy drifts. And the real difference here is that we're doing this in real time and able to surface these control failures long before an auditor ever would. And so that's kind of fundamental to getting things kicked off, is bringing in the full tech stack to allow for this continuous monitoring. Moving on to step 2, this really, retain and audit evidence. This really speaks to the pain and directly addresses the pain with manual compliance, and that's the evidence collection. And by moving to Panther, leveraging a platform like Panther built on a data lake, Panther's able to log every detection, every alert, and every workflow. It's logged, queryable, timestamped, providing a comprehensive and unchangeable audit trail. And this is able to satisfy the strictest of controls around log retention, event tracking, and access monitoring. Historically, we've seen that with legacy SIEM, and you'll see this in one of my case studies, companies are having to make choices and compromise as far as bringing in certain log sources or not bringing in certain log sources. And finally, with step 3, this is where Vanta comes in, validate and report. Vanta consumes a steady stream of control and monitoring data from Panther to confirm this evidence, and then map this evidence to SOC 2 and other compliance requirements in real time. And so this gives our customers, our mutual customers, an always on, always up-to-date view of their compliance readiness. So really, we're combining Panther's continuous monitoring and Vanta's automated compliance to provide a continual view for our customers around the clock, 24/7. So they're not kind of dealing with this once a year, audit preparation lifecycle. So now let me go into 2 case studies, and then I'll pass it over to our partners. So first with Docker, how they were able to achieve SOC 2 compliance with Panther. And I'll just point out a couple things, and I'll share this case study in the chat with everybody. But Docker has a multi-cloud environment, and they found with their legacy tools that they had to make some compromises I mentioned earlier, which is often the case with legacy tools, where they weren't able to bring in all their logs sources and they did not have full visibility, where with Panther they could bring in 3x the log coverage and assume 100% audit evidence in this centralized fashion within the Panther console. And one thing that I'll point out here, and they haven't spoke about detection engineering, is that their detection and response team specifically called out that working with Panther's programmable detection engine built on Python, they're able to fully and completely tune their detections to achieve an 85% reduction in false positives. And you'll see their audit prep time also being cut down from days to hours. The next case study I have is with Cockroach Labs. And Cockroach Labs was able to fully replace their legacy SIEM with Panther and achieve their continuous compliance monitoring. And similar to Docker, they're able to increase their log ingestion, in their case by 5x, while also achieving an annual savings. And one thing that their teams called out was their prep time was cut by 90%, which they just kept, elaborating how huge this was for them. One thing I'll call out, and our customers, often, attribute this as one reason why moving to a modern SIM is, in trying to look for new ways to do compliance. Cockroach Lab, based on legacy SIM and cost, had to cut their log retention from 90 days down to 30 days. So imagine that. They only had 30 days of retention. And then by moving to Panther and our data lake approach, they were able to move to 1 year of hot storage. And so as we get into some of the partner use cases, in particular LVH, when it goes into evidence collection, having retention at least at a year of hot storage is vital to achieving this continuous compliance readiness. So with that, let me go ahead and pass it over to John from AWS.
Thank you, Mike. I'm setting up my, not setting up, but I'm trying to bring me back into the camera. Give me a second here. Let me know if everybody can see me.
Yep, we can see you.
All right, great. Thank you. As Mike mentioned, my name is John Bruno, and we made the introduction earlier. I'm a partner solutions architect at AWS. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to be talking about our global security and compliance acceleration program. If you can go to the next slide, please. The GSCA program really wants to help you accelerate your security and compliance journey. The program is global. The GSCA team can help you with SOC 2, ISO, PCI, HIPAA, FedRAMP, FISMA, RMF, you name it, GDPR for UK and Europe, Protected B for Canada, IRAP in Australia, and more. So we provide support and enhancement and accelerate customers' abilities to meet different regulatory security and compliance requirements globally. So we partner with the country and regional partners to provide localized customer support and engagement. There's a few program outcomes that you can expect from the GSCA program. First and foremost is accelerated security and compliance authorization processes. Second is reduction in cost and time to achieve certification and authorizations. And then lastly, it's improved security, response, and continuous monitoring capabilities leveraging AWS services and AWS partner solutions. Let's go a little bit deeper in the next slide about the GSCA and compliance program. So our goal really is to help you accelerate your security and compliance journey, as I mentioned before. The GSCA program is led by AWS security partners and strategists and solutions architect. Generally, our security partner strategists are former auditors. They came from third-party assessment organizations and have deep knowledge and experience with AWS workloads and the different security and compliance frameworks. The GSCA team provides informal advisory to answer questions for customers, joint meetings, and provide guidance based on our experience with AWS and all the various compliance framework. We also have 2 assigned solution architects to our team that can answer questions, help you navigate various AWS services and architecture questions as they pertain to securing and complying with various frameworks. We can go to the next slide, please. So the GSCA program, we have a wide collection of partners that provide solutions to the program. So customers and partners seeking to meet regulatory requirements usually need they need more than one partner to help them to get through their solutions. And one of the partners that we have for this is Panther. And let's take, for example, SOC 2. Give me just a second. I'm not able to see the slide. I do see. Give me a second. Let me see which slides we're on. Yeah. Yeah. So we're on the right slide. Yes. So let's take SOC 2, for example. SOC 2 defines criteria for the secure management of business data. Panther's data lake architecture out of the box detections gives real-time alerts and issue tracking features that allow organizations to quickly cover a number of requirements for SOC 2 certification. And when you combine that with Vanta, who is also a GSCA program partner, it helps companies scale security practices and automate compliance for the industry's most after-sought standards, such as SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, GDPR, and other on-demand and in-demand security and privacy frameworks. So here's the framework that we use, or the process that we use to work with our partners. We set up bi-weekly or monthly calls based on our preference, based on our partner's preference or customer's preference, and we work very closely with our partners. And then we start bi-weekly for starters, and then we can always cancel or adjust as needed. Our partners have both a primary and secondary security partner strategists assigned to their account to help them achieve their business outcomes and help our customers achieve their goals for the frameworks that they want to achieve. The slide that you're seeing now, it's our shared responsibility model. If we can go to the next slide, please. The one before that talks about the shared responsibility model. Thank you. Yeah, that slide, basically, when it comes to security and compliance, it helps you to understand as a customer or even as a partner, there's a shared responsibility for these two, for both compliance and security. So that will depend on the services that a customer might choose. The shared model can help relieve the customer's operational burden. This is because AWS operates, manages, and controls the components from the host operating system and virtualizations layer down to the physical security of the facilities in which the service operates. The customer assumes responsibility and management of the guest operating system, such as updates and security practices, and other associated application software. In addition to the configuration of the AWS provided security group firewall. So the nature of this shared responsibility also provides us flexibility and customer control that permits customer to deploy solutions that meet their specific certification requirements. So strong customer compliance and governance may include the following basic approach. For example, they have to review their shared responsibility model. They have to review AWS security documentation, AWS compliance reports, and other information available from AWS, and together with other specific documentation. They have to design and implement control objectives to meet the entire compliance requirements as laid out in the AWS shared responsibility model. And third, they have to identify and document controls on by outside parties, because if they are not aware of those, they might not meet full compliance. Lastly, they have to verify that all control objectives are met and all key controls are designed and operated effectively. Next slide, please. So with the shared responsibility model, We have several services that are designed to help our customers with to have adherence to to many of the controls. We align the AWS security services to the 5 pillars of the security well-architected framework. So Audit Manager, for example, you can use that to continually audit your AWS usage to simplify risk and compliance assessments. There are some other services that we're going to go over. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this slide talks about the, well, many of our security services related to threat detection, monitoring, and response. But the service that I want to focus is the one in the middle, AWS Security Hub. So to increase the operational efficiency of your application developers and or your DevOps teams, you need to have an integrated approach when it comes to security operational processes that can provide you with continuous visibility for ongoing monitoring and proactively detect threats. AWS Security Hub is our services that focuses on cloud security posture management. It helps to aggregate findings, provide you with a single pane of glass for security teams. It also checks against key regulatory and compliance frameworks for misconfigurations and provides automatic alerts. Another service, well, if we can go to the next slide, it helps demonstrate some of the controls that you can check against. For example, you can ensure that no root account access key exists. You can ensure multi-factor authentication is enabled for all your IAM users that have a console password. You can ensure that S3 bucket CloudTrail logs 2 is not publicly accessible. And you can check against many compliance modules that are automatically provided to you. Another service that I want to talk about is CloudTrail. If we can go to the, yeah, that's the right slide. So CloudTrail, basically, it's your compliance and audit solution because CloudTrail automatically documents all AWS account activity, providing you with internal and regulatory compliance requirements with the immutable history of all AWS activities, giving you historical records of all API calls, detailed records of user and service actions, and it creates timestamp audit trails and records all AWS management console actions. For regulatory support, it helps you meet major compliance framework requirements because it provides you with evidence for audits and enables continuous monitoring. The next service that I like to mention is our AWS config service. If we can go to the next slide, please. So AWS config is really your it helps you with your compliance. It's in several ways because it provides and delivers continuous compliance monitoring by maintaining detailed configuration records, tracking resource relationships, providing historical configuration data, evaluating against compliance rules, and alerting you on compliance violations. Some of its core capabilities are resource tracking, documents resource relationships, record configuration changes, and maintain audit-ready history, and provides you with real-time monitoring as well. So those are the key services that I wanted to talk in this talk track that combine with integrations with our partner services that will help our customers meet with compliance. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, John. And Really appreciate hearing how AWS and that shared security model just help make this compliance journey so much easier for customers. I'd love to hop into talking a little bit more about the Vanta side of the world and how we see automated compliance, and particularly the trends in the industry. So hopping right into it, if you don't mind changing slides. Vanta runs every year what we call the State of Trust Report, and that goes out to over 2,500 security professionals and really looks into how their programs are running and what they're seeing around not just their teams, but the market generally. And the big signal we're getting this year, this is our latest State of Trust data, is a little bit bleak. We're still seeing teams that are really struggling to get ahead of the job of compliance and security and really nail those core jobs to allow them to do things like improve security or bring in new tools or make new investments. So across the State of Trust report this year alone, we saw 72% of respondents indicate overall risk being at an all-time high. And that was actually up 17% year over year. So not only is risk increasing, but it's increasing at an increasing rate, which is a really alarming thing for us and technology at large, and something we need to stay on top of. Across all of that, 56% of respondents experienced some form of vendor breach. One of their vendors, could be a key vendor, could be a vendor they're using across their company, experienced a breach, which means that not only do they have to be really conscious and aware of their program, but also look across all of their vendors to make sure that they're secure there as well. I think one of the more alarming stats we saw as well is that most of these teams are stuck in really reactive cycles. We're seeing teams that spend an average of 12 weeks per year just on compliance tasks, and then they're adding another 9 weeks per year for vendor security reviews. Among the other activities they're doing, you can kind of net that at them spending almost half a year just on proving security and not on improving it. So again, they're going through the task of validating that their vendors are secure, generating user access lists, preparing evidence and other data for audits. And during all of those steps, what they're not doing is evaluating new tools, understanding gaps in their program, or holistically solving risk across their program. Adding on top of that, across that same year, we saw that 82% of businesses really indicate that building security is going to help them build customer trust and win more business. And stakeholders, not just internal, but external, 77% of companies are indicating that stakeholders are asking for that verifiable trust. So the pressure is on. They have to both generate all of this trust-related data and compliance-related data, but they also have companies around them and stakeholders around them asking more and more for that story to come out crisply. And our thinking here is that the way to really answer this challenge without burning out the team or, the thing we can't do, go hire 40, 50, 60 more people in our security compliance orgs, is to use automation. Next slide, please. So as we look across Vanta, the way we see the market is that we have really fragmented approaches today when it comes to meeting compliance and trust needs. You can see here that it's across the board. You may have no central ownership in your team for who's responsible for trust or compliance. Teams working in silos, very little visibility, spikes in certain places, stale old data, those user access lists that go bad the day you produce them, risk registers that are tracking hundreds of risks that never seem to change, tools that don't talk to each other and don't show you the full life cycle of how they of how they're preventing risk or managing your users. Really point in time visibility, log into GitHub, see the information, not have a perspective full time, and chasing down evidence, having to go to each individual owner and stakeholder and ask them to produce evidence and spend their time producing it. That all leads to an extremely fragmented compliance program and one that becomes very expensive and very hard to replicate. And we think is leading to a lot of the data you saw there in the State of Trust report. As we look ahead to the future, we see an opportunity for intelligent, unified, and continuous security and compliance to help plug this gap. And what that means is core concepts like continuous. Vanta today uses 400 plus pre-built integrations to help bring data into Vanta and help you automatically profile not just where your resources, your people, your devices are off track or non-compliant, but to generate evidence for audit for you so that you're not chasing down those user access lists. They're being produced for you. It's AI powered. And we're finding the AI automation is saving teams 12 hours per week in some of those rote and manual jobs across their compliance program. More AI powered in the right places relieves pressure on teams and again allows them to focus on actually preventing risk and increasing security. And lastly, it's unified. It brings together not just your data and your evidence and your frameworks, but it brings together how you track compliance, how you track risk, and how you build assurance within your company. And all of that ladders up to what we're all after here, trust. That could be trust to your internal company and stakeholders that you're doing the right things and you're ready to go after that SOC 2 or that ISO 27001. It can be trust to your external stakeholders. It can be trust to your customers. It builds up that sense of success and that you're doing the right things. Lastly, I want to cover how this brings together with Panther. The story here is continuous compliance. Vanta plus Panther equals that outcome. On the Panther side, as we've heard, you're getting that real-time monitoring and detection, you're getting threat detection, you're getting log ingestion across your sources, and you're getting alerting and drift detection that help you profile risks in real time. And then with Vanta, you're centralizing evidence and control validation. You're building up your evidence collection automatically. You're testing your controls to make sure they're working every single day, every single hour, and you're getting that audit level reporting. Those two stories combined lead you to continuous visibility and always on audit readiness. And rather than just say it, I actually want to pass it to LVH here, who's going to show how this works in practice and how all of us come together to build a strong and resilient compliance program. Before I hop there, though, last little point is from our Vanta team here who uses a Panther. You can see that when we have these two stories tied together, it becomes the backbone of how we print out continuous compliance. Nathan here on our security team shared that we are using tools like AWS. We're pulling that data into tools like Panther, and we're using that to build the story in Vanta. And when we actually demonstrate our compliance and when we go after our certifications.
Thank you. I really appreciate that layup. I'm going to speak to how Latacora uses all of the above, so AWS, Vanta, and Panther, to enable compliance for customers. So next slide, please. When writing this, I realized that really a lot of what I'm saying is essentially just a practical illustration of what all the previous speakers have already said. Because as I mentioned, first of all, we deliver detection and response practices, for example, for customers, and Panther is a cornerstone technology of that. We're a Vanta partner, and we help customers deliver on their GRC, their governance, risk, and compliance requirements using Vanta. And all our entire tech stack is built on top of AWS. So is Panther, by the way, runs entirely on AWS. And most of our customers are on AWS as well. So these are all technologies that we're really, really familiar with, and I'm hoping to illustrate some of the sort of what does that look like very practically. So if you can go to the next slide, please. We've already spoken about a bunch of them, and so I'm going to go over that fairly quickly. We've talked about how alerting is directly necessary for both the having the alerts in the first place and being able to tune them effectively. I made references there to the SOC 2 CCs, but obviously that's true for a whole host of compliance regimes. There's the routine evidence collection, like the alert logs, the stored data itself. Something that I don't remember that I didn't hear mentioned. Detections as code is actually another really great example of where Panther just makes it possible to keep track of your detections in a way that is a lot more consistent to the way that hopefully a lot of your engineers are already working. You're outside of detection and response, I mean. And conveniently, as a side effect, what that means is you get this fantastic audit trail. Not just within Panther itself, but like of the way that you used Panther in the first place, which we've also found to be really, really convincing for third parties, be they auditors or particularly picky customers. And then finally, there's the sort of weird out of left field one-off requests. And I think this is where I'm going to focus, mostly not because the other stuff isn't important. The other stuff is table stakes. But we've already talked about that quite a bit. And so I really wanted to illustrate how well these tools work, not just when it's the routine stuff that you can see coming, which I agree is incredibly important, but it's the out of left field stuff. It's the things that you could not have seen coming. It's the either the auditor or the third party compliance or security person asking just a really, really I'm going to say nitpicky question, and maybe it's not really nitpicky, but they're certainly not making your life easy. And so, if anything, I found that doesn't get better necessarily when your practice becomes more mature, because if your practice becomes more mature, odds are that you're also making stronger claims to many of your customers. And the reason why you might be making those stronger claims is possibly because your customers demand them. And so as a consequence, it's not necessarily the case that just because your practice evolves, that the questions get easier. It tends to be the other way around. Another, we mentioned the importance of evidence collection and how that really ends up being the thing that catches a lot of teams. Is it's not just the fact, are you doing it, but it's also are you doing that consistently, and can you demonstrate that you've been doing it consistently? And that's particularly true when you look at something like SOC 2 Type 2's focus on the fact that it's not just the controls, it's the controls over time. And as I mentioned, it's not only, yes, auditors, absolutely, but that might also be for your contractually guaranteed audit rights. Like if your third parties have permission to come look at exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it, it can come up in security questionnaires. We have a bunch of regulated entities where the regulator not necessarily is demanding it today, but they are sort of sniffing around and seeing whether or not they could demand it tomorrow, and they certainly would like to know what you're actually doing. And then finally, of course, preparing for your audit. We mentioned in the context of Vanta the continuous audit readiness, and I think Mike mentioned that as well. That's also an incredibly important exercise, and so I'm going to try and illustrate that a little bit. So next slide, please. I did add a slide in here for the sort of very traditional, take a screenshot. Fortunately, there are better ways, as we've seen through Vanta. There are better ways to do most of that now. A lot of auditors and third parties still insist on it, but fortunately, Panther is of course more than capable of getting you being able to drill down into a particular alert, looking at how things are configured, et cetera. And sometimes you need that to be able to convince a third party. But as I mentioned earlier, like it's not that this isn't important. In fact, this is, I would say, 95% of the game. But that's not testing the limits of your tools, right? This is table stakes. Of course, Panther can do this. Of course, Vanta can do this, right? Like this is too easy. So if you can go to the next slide, please. One of the was that one? Yeah, sorry. I have two slides that have nearly the same titles. The good news is that compliance and security very often want the same things, and we deliver, like I said, we deliver a lot of security outcomes, and we deliver a lot of GRC outcomes. And what's interesting about compliance is how cross-cutting it is, right? Like compliance sort of needs to pay attention to all of the other components of stuff that we're doing. And one of the reasons that I think that tools like Panther work so well in that context is because at the end of the day, most of the things that compliance wants and the things that security wants are really the same thing, right? Can I count on the evidence being there? Can I count on the query working the same way that it did yesterday? Can I count on the query to do what I think it does? Or do I need a PhD in my particular SIEM to be able to even tell what this thing means? Another question is expressivity, especially if you're dealing with either a larger organization. Let's say that you've got a compliance person who may be extremely dyed in the wool when it comes to, I don't know, HIPAA and high trust, right? Like they have a lot of really specific knowledge, but they're not detection engineers, right? Like they're not spending day in, day out writing detections or doing investigations, et cetera. Can they also easily access that same information, or is it gated through a team where potentially it takes you way too long? Like the success stories that I think certainly I appreciate, and I think our customers appreciate too, are the cases where you've got a customer or you've got an auditor on the line right now, and we're going to do it in front of them live, and it's going to work anyway. I think that's really what sets okay or mediocre tools apart from truly fantastic ones. And then finally, there's the integration story, because again, for both Panther, this is something I think detection and response has in common with compliance. It tends to be cross-cutting, right? Like the attacker isn't necessarily conveniently restricted to doing something on an endpoint. They're doing something in Okta and something on an endpoint and something in, I don't know, in Azure and something in AWS, right? And so can we get at cross-cutting information, because it's fairly rare that all of the information that your auditor wants happens to live in one system. That's precisely why systems like Vanta end up being so useful. If we can go to the next slide, please. And just to answer, like I'm taking mostly a Panther specific tack here, but obviously it enable, like it all comes together, right? Like but I think a lot of that reliability is in the case of Panther enabled by at least in our case we use Snowflake, which has been the primary data store for Panther. My understanding is that Databricks is in beta now. I haven't personally used it, but my understanding is it works great. And that there is an MCP that enables me to go and access that information reliably. In terms of expressivity, Panther gives you plenty of options depending on what exactly you want to accomplish in order to be able to reliably express what are you really getting at. And again, Snowflake is the underlying database. Is a pretty fantastic answer there, right? Because if you've used other SIEMs before, I'm guessing you've ran into a situation, certainly I have, so a lot of my background is in incident response. Certainly while doing incident response, I have more than once ended up in a situation where the limitation was legitimately, I can't get the same, I don't have enough expressivity, I can't express the thing that I want. If that's ever happened with Panther, I don't remember it happening. Obviously really happy there. And then again, MCP, I'll be demonstrating that in sort of the next couple of examples as to why precisely MCP is helpful there. And then finally, integration, you'll see I'll highlight MCP again because I think it's really new, but nevertheless, it's been a tremendous improvement. All of the things that Mike mentioned earlier, for example, with the successes that Cockroach Labs mentioned, if memory serves, like yes, all of that is 100% true, but more importantly, that was before they got to use some of this newer technology on top of that. So like the gains have only improved since then. And of course, Panther supports a gazillion, that's a technical term, log sources. It's pretty rare that we run into a log source that we can't ingest, especially just because of the degree to which S3 has become the lingua franca for a lot of that. Like we've implemented plenty of log sources, and compared to the amount of effort that it took to implement log sources, which I've also done in other SIEMs and legacy SIEMs, it's just not the same ball game. It's a lot easier to do. And then of course, again, Snowflake, repeat, there's a lot of technology choices here that happen to have a lot of advantages, right? If we can go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to do a demo, which is it's mildly terrifying, but fortunately it's mostly mildly terrifying for me. I wanted to start with some of the small print because I'm an engineer at heart, and personally, I really dislike it when somebody does a demo and it's this like carefully curated thing that just doesn't work in your situation. And this is as real as I can reasonably make it, given the fact that, of course, I want it to be able to work for demo purposes. So I just wanted to be like really transparent about what we're going to do and what the parts are that how you might accomplish something similar yourself. So this is a test environment. It's not prod, but it is roughly based on Latacora zone with some intentional deficiencies. There are obviously always some limitations due to the fact that it's not a real environment, and so it's close, but it's not quite the real thing. So I'll be showing one of Latacora's internal tools here, which is really just a frontier model. Everything you're going to see today is GPT-5, works equally well on Claude on Bedrock, plus a bunch of MCPs. Some of that is for our internal tooling, but the main one that you're going to see is for Panther itself. You could do something really, really similar with Claude Desktop. And in fact, I know that Mike does, Mike Olson from Panther, because the last call that I was on with Mike, we screen shared the Claude Desktop that was doing really, really similar things against the Panther MCP. So the extent to which that there is special sauce, I'm using this tool, but I'm really just using it because it gives me easy access to all of those things, right? Like I don't have to go manually set up a bunch of MCP servers. There's a bunch of notes in there describing the environment that the LLM has access to. So that might be things like, for example, if I was auditing Panther's environment, hey, there were a bunch of AWS accounts in here, for example, and some of those AWS accounts represent customer environments, things like that, to help the LLM make sense of the data that it's seeing. Some Latacora tooling that knows about system configurations. So we have tools that essentially hit every, in the case of AWS, like get, list, and describe API, and builds this historical graph of all the resources that exist within an environment. We do that for GitHub, we do that for AWS, we do that for Google Workspace and a couple of other services. So you'll see some examples of that. And of course, there is some knowing where not to look, right? Like it's, clearly you still need to know what questions to ask, and you might need to tell the LLM to kind of go in the right direction. Although it certainly feels to me like every month that gets a little bit easier. And we use, this isn't just for demo, right? Like we use Panther MCP for operational tasks like this and developing rules every day, right? In fact, the most common way that we use Panther MCP isn't attached to this system per se, it's attached to an editor. And so, all of this stuff works really great out of the box, but it really, really shines for detections as code development, which is what we do most of the time. And because of the flexibility and log ingestion that I already mentioned, we end up using it for IT tasks. Like we end up using it for asking questions about like, hey, which users are using this particular, I don't know, Google Workspace authorized app or whatever. Like when's the last time, like are people actually signing into this or, stuff like that. We actually end up using the same tools off label just because frankly, they're that much better than the alternatives. So if we can go to the next slide, which I think is the list of demos. Yep, there we go. So I'll walk you through some of the demos, and then I'll try and make this relatively quick because I want to make sure that we can go to questions. I want to make sure that I've got the time to and all the other speakers as well, of course. But like if you have a question about anything that we're doing here, I'd rather just take that head on. So some of the demos that we're going to show are confirming that Tailscale connected GitHub runners are using OAuth workload identities. So that's actually pretty close to one that came up with the customer. So these are Tailscale if you're not familiar, is a VPN. We use it to connect a bunch of internal services, and we want to make sure that all of the compute, including the GitHub runners, are using strong authentication methods to get onto Tailscale. That we're not using just like a hard-coded password, basically, because what happens if someone steals that and all of a sudden, completely outside of the context of GitHub, has access to all of our internal services. It's a good example of an important control that good, but it's probably not one that you may have thought to think of evidence for before. And it turns out that's kind of the gist of what I'm trying to demonstrate with these examples. Even in the event that you get caught and you end up realizing like, oops, yeah, we have that control. I know we have that control, but we don't have the evidence for it, I think. And someone asks for it at the last minute, you can actually still get at it really, really easily. And again, I think that's the difference between having okay tools and having fantastic tools. Next one I'm going to show, actually, maybe I'll just show them, I'll show them one at a time. So let's start with the Tailscale one. I'm going to steal the screen share here. If I can get, excuse me. So that's the slides, and I think you should be seeing a screen that says system prompt in the top left.
Yes.
Cool. So, this is presumably anyone who's used ChatGPT, this is going to look pretty similar. It's just a conversation with an LLM. And I pretty much just asked it that question, right? Like check the Tailscale audit logs for authentication events from GitHub runners. Their Tailscale target names all start with GitHub runner, and confirm that all of them are only using OAuth workload identities to authenticate to Tailscale. Now we're using, in this case, GPT-5. Again, as long as you're using a frontier model, it really doesn't matter as much. Claude Sonnet does fantastic as well. And so you can kind of go through some of the reasoning that it does. And here you'll see that it's using Panther tools in order to, so this is the request that it asked for. It's using Panther tools to go and identify like, hey, what data do I even have in this database? That's really useful for us as well because we're using this across customers, right? So it's not necessarily a given. I might have misremembered something about a customer. It's not even necessarily a given. Maybe they've misconfigured a particular log source, something like that. So it identified the log sources, and it's going to go take a look at the schema, and it's going to write a SQL query in order to go get this relevant piece of information. And what I like about this is, keep in mind the actual output it's not like you're running the LLM over all of the data, right? So you get to sort of look at all of the intermediate tasks and steps and reasoning that it's doing. And so you can have really high confidence that even though this was generated in literally seconds, you can have really high confidence that it does what it says on the tin, because this isn't trying to replace someone's ability to write or read SQL, right? Like it's just a way to get there much, much faster, because again, in a lot of these scenarios, even though they're hypothetical, they're pretty close to reality. There might be an auditor on a Zoom call, and you might have a director of compliance or a coworker, frantically slacking you or teamsing you or whatever you use to try and get this information. So it figured out how to query all of these logs. It wrote follow-up queries based on the output that it got. And then it remember the part where it said like, hey, no, actually, I want to make sure that there are no non-OAuth login events. And then it eventually summarizes all of this, and it says, yep, you've got tail-scale audit logs. They're in this table. I found these events. I ran this query, and here's a summary of all of the authentication events that I saw, and here's my interpretation of that. So it's really easy to if the LLM does make an error in reasoning or falsely excludes the same way that a human could make a mistake, right? Like maybe there's a third way that you've accidentally excluded. It's really easy to go check its work. And of course, it asks for some helpful follow-up questions. Like in this case, I only did it over 7 days, but clearly you could change the 70 to 365 or whatever your requirement is, and then you get a broader example. Moving on to my second example, which is OS query-based machine compliance checks are recorded and then give the option to investigate. Again, keep in mind my example here, as we saw earlier in the Vanta presentation, the vast majority of compliance checks you don't need to do this for, right? Like the vast majority of compliance checks, no problem. It's the either because you're trying to prep for your audit and there's something that you weren't expecting to see and you're going to investigate that now, or it's because a third party is asking like a really, borderline persnickety question, and for whatever reason they're not happy with the evidence that you've presented, and they want to know something extra. It's rare, but you want to know that your tools can do it when you need them to. So in this case, I asked for FleetDM is the name of our mobile device management tool, which runs OS query in the background, and I asked it for OS query results with OS query snapshot results with a non-zero number of results. So it's basically give me all of the rules that you ran regularly that had results in them. And it did something very similar. It talked to Panther. It tried to figure out how to query that database, and it did that. Again, seconds. Obviously, I prepared this particular query, but this is absolutely something that is on a time scale that you could do it live on a call with an auditor. And it found a whole bunch of rules that ran. And one that stood out to me when I reviewed this, of course, you could ask the LLM like, hey, are there any of those that feel particularly concerned? This is something that we do. We describe the company. We describe their sort of like general risk posture. Like, is this a really mature company with very picky customers, or is this kind of like a startup where their velocity is really important and they're not necessarily focused on a ton of controls right now? You can ask the LLM like, hey, are any of these things that stick out to you? And one of them that certainly stuck out to me was identifying third-party third-party kernel extensions on macOS. And it was very rapidly able to, let me go down a little bit, very rapidly able to identify where that was coming from. And then I believe, if I go down a little bit more, it was able to, sorry, I'm going to go down to the part that's particularly interesting. It was able to cross-reference a bunch of different records, in this case, tail-scale audit logs, simultaneously with OS query. So what I really wanted to do was, hey, it's not good enough that I know that this is happening on one particular machine. I want to know which machine this is happening on, and I want to make sure that those records are matching up, right? Like, is there just like one machine on my network that has a weird-looking kernel extension, or can I identify what machine that is and what access it has, what tool it has access to? So, because of the MCP, which I feel is sort of simultaneously, it's everything and it's nothing, because it's at the end of the day, it's just a way for LLMs to have tools talk to each other. But it's also, it enables all of these incredible features where you're talking to a Tailscale audit log and an OS query audit log. And it's really just a question of having that set up in Panther. I didn't need to tell Panther to do anything in particular in order to enable this. And it was able to identify that there's a specific laptop that does indeed have a kernel extension, but fortunately it is that was in a previous, it was a code signed Logitech mouse driver, so it wasn't that big of a deal. It's not great, but it's not a 5 alarm fire. And again, it's even helpfully asking me like, hey, do you want to tie this to like Google Workspace logs? If this was something that was concerning, then that might be something I wanted to do. I'll do one more example, but I also want to be mindful of time. So maybe we can go to questions after this, and if there's extra time and people are interested, I'd be happy to
we
do another
might
one.
have to hop to
Okay.
questions just
Yeah.
because we're almost at the top of the hour, but I want to see the rest of these. We'll talk about how to get them in the hands of the people. I think they deserve it. Thank you so much for sharing the demos. That was very insightful. And thank you to all of our presenters. So I know we just have a couple minutes. So if anybody has questions, and we have a few that have come in, this one, I think maybe LVH, this might be a good question for you. How does continuous log monitoring help teams prove control effectiveness during audits?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that there's a couple of ways to approach that question, right? So one is you'll typically have a compliance requirement. So for example, SOC 2, CC 7.2, 7.3, you'll have a compliance requirement to just be doing the continuous log monitoring, right? So the fact that you're doing it in itself is already valuable to compliance. And then I think that question may have been asked before I started my demo. So I hope that some of the things that I demonstrated may be a really good example of that. And of course, then there's the for Vanta where there's what'd you say, Gavin, 400 plus integrations, and I don't even know how many different compliance controls. Those are all the ones that are being checked already automatically, but you need the data in order for that to work. And then what I was trying to demonstrate is the sort of like, hey, by the way, if there's long tail stuff that you didn't think that maybe, I don't know, came in later, or that you didn't think to do in advance, or didn't come in the default, didn't come into the default set of controls, as long as your tools are good enough to support that style of querying, you can still get at that data really easily. And that turns a SOC 2 with all sorts of asterisks and notes about evidence that the auditor wasn't able to find into a SOC 2 that you pass with flying colors. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, if there's any follow-up to that question and his answer, please drop it in. I think we have time for maybe one more. And then I'm going to share my screen so everybody can see some additional info for each team. So if you want to follow up, of course, you can Google and we'll send a follow-up email, but here's some good links to head to learn a little bit more. And we'll do one more question. I lost my Q&A panel. And there it is. Let's see. What are some of the most common SOC 2 controls Panther helps teams satisfy automatically?
Gavin, I don't know if you want to jump in on that one. I know we have the Panther out-of-the-box detections that would cover a bit of those automatically, but I don't know specifically like percentages.
Yeah, I would say, like, to answer it a little bit generally, you're going to see that typically around controls over detection, change management, just general log aggregation practices. And so, like, it's the benefit of continuous monitoring is, like, at any point in time, you're going to know what your status looks like, versus a typical audit cycle where you're taking a very point in time sample that will drift almost immediately. And so the very general answer there is it's a completely different way to approach the audit, whereby you can come in and sample the most appropriate evidence at a point in time over how your logs are managed, how you're reacting, the alerts you have set up, monitoring you have set up, and use that as evidence, rather than having to do the hey, person who owns SimTool, go spend your entire very expensive day printing out this log file. Oh, it doesn't look quite right. Do it again. Ooh, there's a bunch of issues here. Do it again. You're out of that workflow and you're fixing the drifts before they happen, and you have a really reliable evidence as a result.
Yeah, and I think to tag on that, a big part that we've kind of touched on is allowing customers to bring in full log ingestion as compared to just like, make choices. Because if you can't bring in all your logs, get full, coverage across all of your tech stack, then you're not going to be close to that, automated compliance that Gavin's talking about.
Thank you so much to our attendees for the great questions, to our panelists for sharing such incredible information. Like I said, if you want to follow up with any of these teams, here are the links to do so. We're going to wrap up there. Thank you, everybody, for spending your time. We'll catch you later. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.